We're good? Okay. Anyways, I am from Southern California. Some of you might know another Peter Lynn. He's actually in Texas. He grows Phalaenopsis, and we've actually met out in California and at Redlands. So there are two of us, and we're not the same person. But anyways, I am from California, and I grow a lot of Cattleyas, mini cats. But I also have interests in dendrobiums and gracoids and neophenicias and other vandas and things like that. So, you know, if you're like me, you just can't stick with one type of orchid. But one of my favorites, and when I started growing orchids when I was 17, I visited a friend's greenhouse, and he had a lot of Cattleyas, and mini cats were always some of my favorites. So that's what my talk is on tonight. So my first slide is meant to kind of represent what mini cats are all about. And so let's take a look at that. Whoa, whoa, wait a minute. Those are not orchids. But they are mini cats or mini kittens. So actually this is the correct slide, showing you they come in all kinds of colors, splash petals, spotted types, and all the jewel-like colors that come in Cattleyas. So what we're going to look at tonight is why do you want to grow mini cats? We'll look at the species, primary hybrids, some of the early hybrids, and then the current hybrids of today, including the splash petal types, spotted hybrids, and sort of a newish category that I'm particularly interested in are micro mini cats. We'll look at culture, how to grow them. I'll do a little presentation on repotting your mini cats, and then we can have time for questions and answers at the end. But I do like to hold very informal talks, so if you happen to have a particular question about a slide or plant photo, just ask it then and I'll answer it at that time. That way you don't have to worry about forgetting your question, you know, when we get to the end. So why do you want to grow mini cats? Well, they are small and compact. So how many of you have unlimited space and you have no problem keeping your collection? Yeah, I kind of thought so. You're just like me. I can't stop buying new orchids. My space is always getting more and more crowded. So they are small and compact. So on the left you'll see a standard size Cattleya. On the right of the plant is a mini cat. And I can fit 3 or more little mini cats in the space of a standard size cat. They can flower more than once a year. So depending on some of the parentage of the hybrids, I have some mini cats that will bloom 2 times a year, sometimes 3 times a year. They are available in most of the Cattleya, standard Cattleya flower colors. The 2 colors that are not well represented would be white and green. They grow and bloom faster than standard Cattleyas, and that's important for those of you who like to breed orchids from seed, because you know, a standard cat can take anywhere from 5 to 7 years to bloom from seed. That's a long time and a long investment. So we can get mini cats to bloom in 3 to 4 years. Many of the hybrids are temperature tolerant, so that means they can take lower temperatures and probably on the hotter side as well. And that can be important for those of you who like to grow your orchids outside for at least part of the year or most of the year. You don't have to bring them in until, you know, the temperatures go down into the low 40s or even the high 30s on a lot of these mini cat hybrids. So let's take a look at what some of the mini cat species are.
Points for mini cats. Do you have mini cats with more than 4 flowers or 5 flowers to a raceme, like Beau type things?
Yeah, the question is, do you have mini cats that have more than 4 or 5 flowers? Yes, we do now, because when we cross the little mini species with bifoliate type of Cattleyas, cluster bloomers like Aurantiaca, some of the encyclias and epidendrums have multiple flowers, we can get more flowers on them.
And you still got them below 6
But we still got them, well, 6 to 8 inches, yeah. But you know, the majority of them, because of the parentage, they usually have 2 to 3 flowers for most of the mini cats. The first one is Cattleya luteola, and this is a species from Brazil. It has flowers that are about 2 inches across, but they can have anywhere from 6 to 10 flowers on a single spike. So that can be useful in creating cluster bloomers, as you see here. Cattleya walkeriana, also from Brazil. It has fairly large flowers. They can be as large as 4 or 5 inches across. And it is one of the few mini species that is fragrant. So that's an important feature for some of you. A lot of times people ask, are the mini cats fragrant? Usually the orange and red tones are not fragrant because of the parent species. But if it has Cattleya walkeriana in it, it can be fragrant. Different color forms exist. There's a semi-alba form, cerulean form, which is kind of that bluish lavender color, as well as alba, which is all white. They typically bloom very close to the base of the plant, as you see here. They don't even, reach above the leaves. And there can be 3 to 4 flowers on a single spike on the Cattleya walkeriana. So I mentioned the orange and red tones. This is probably the parent species that's responsible for the orange and red colors, and that's Sophronitis coccinea. One of my favorite species, but it's not easy to grow and maintain. They do like to be on the cool side. They come from high Brazil. They get nightly fog that has really high humidity at night. So I grow these usually in moss, sphagnum moss in a clay pot, and that helps to keep them on the moist side and on the coolish side. These typically bloom in the winter, and the flowers will last 6 to 8 weeks in bloom. They only grow 4 inches tall at the most. Most of them are about 3 inches tall. Usually 1 to 2 flowers on a single bulb, but they form many new growths. So you can see a plant like this that's in a 3-inch clay pot. It can have quite a number of flowers on a single plant. Now this is Coccinea is already a miniature species, but this is even smaller. This is a really small variety that I found in Japan at the Tokyo Dome show, and that's blooming in a 2-inch pot. You can see how tiny it is, and I've been using this as a parent for breeding other micro mini cats. That's still a Coccinea, yeah. This is the sister species. This is Wittigiana. It's known as the pink Sophronitis. Most of these I grow on wood or cork. It doesn't need the constant moisture, high humidity as Coccinea, so I find it a little easier to grow. And it has not been used too much in hybridization, so that's one of the reasons why I like to use it to breed a lot of little pink micro mini cats. This is Sophronitis cernua, also from Brazil, but lower elevation in Brazil. So this is actually a intermediate to warm grower. It does not need the cool nights, and people in the south and Florida can grow this very easily. Yeah? Oh, sorry. This is one that I have in a pot, but they also grow very well mounted, as we'll see next. They can be up to 9 flowers on a single growth. The flowers are only about 1 inch across. Here's a particularly nice, nicely full-shaped one, and I've been using this in breeding a lot of mini cats now. This is one that's grown on a piece of cork log. Another sister species of Sophronitis is Breva pedunculata, and it has purplish red flowers. They're about 2.5 inches across. I grow most of these mounted as well. This is Laelia pumila, also from Brazil. It is a dwarf species that grows about 5 or 6 inches tall with a very large 4-inch size flower. Usually 1 flower per growth, but sometimes you'll get 2. This is one of the smallest Lallias. This is Lallia alaorii. It was recently discovered probably in the last 10 to 12 years, so it's a fairly recent discovery. It's a very small flower, less than 2 inches across. The flowers don't necessarily open up all the way. They're a little cup-shaped, but here shows you the growth habit of it. It's only less than 3 inches tall. And you can see there's 2 buds forming in the growth, so they can have 1 to 2 flowers per growth. And this particular species blooms 2 or 3 times a year, so that is useful in the breeding of mini cats that will bloom more than once a year. I have a couple plants of this on the sale table if you're interested. Lallia bergeri is one of the Rupiculus Lallias. These are the rock. They grow amongst rock outcroppings in Brazil. They are very tough plants that can withstand pretty harsh conditions, dryness, heat, cold. They have brilliant yellow flowers, about 2 inches wide, that form at the top, at the end of a spike that's about 8 inches tall. Browtonia sanguinea is another Cattleya relative that is from Jamaica. It is a warm grower. It typically grows about 4 inches tall. The spike will grow about 1 foot long, and it is a sequential bloomer, meaning that it will form new buds after the older flowers drop, and it will bloom for 2 or 3 months in the summertime. Usually it's grown mounted. It is one of those species that doesn't like to be have the roots covered in media.
Isn't that a weed on the orange trees down there?
It might be, yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
This is the albiform, so almost all white. Cattleya clandii is where we get some of our spotted hybrids. And it's a dwarf species, kind of olive green with these deep burgundy spots and a nice purple lip. It is another one of the species that doesn't like to be contained in a pot with media. So they're most often grown mounted on a piece of wood or in a basket where the roots can kind of hang out and be exposed to the air. It is also one that will bloom 2 or 3 times a year. So a lot of the spotted hybrids will bloom more than once a year. Yeah. How high should the light be? I grow most of mine hanging, so they get more light than the ones that are on the table. So they do appreciate pretty bright light for Cattleyas. Primary hybrids is the next section, and a primary hybrid is simply a hybrid between 2 species. So the first one is S.C. Beaufort. It's a hybrid between Coccinea and Luteola, and this is one of the results of it. And you'll see that Beaufort has been used hundreds of times as a parent. It is a really good parent. It is not the easiest to grow. That comes from bergeri. This is S.L. orchidii. This is a hybrid that was made in the 1920s or so. It was a really early hybrid between Coccinea and Lallia pumila. So these are really dwarf plants, about 4 inches tall with a 2.5-inch flower. Mini purpled, some of you might have this. This is a classic hybrid between pumila and walkeriana, and this happens to be a very dark colored variety. Jungle elf is where we get some of our first spotted hybrids. This is a clandii crossed to another Rupiculus Lallia, even smaller than bergeri, called Esaukiana. So this is LC jungle elf. Here's a close-up of it. And you can see it has brilliant yellow flowers with those nice red burgundy spots. Okay, so let's look at some early hybrids. One of my favorites is SL Mini Pet, and that's orchidii crossed back to Coccinea. So, you know, Coccineas, like I said, can be tricky to grow, but this hybrid is a little bit easier, and it still has the brilliant red, pretty large flowers. They can be as large as 3 inches across. Here's my plant of this, and about 4 years later it looked like this. And I have 2 seedlings of mini pet on the sale table. We've remade it several times since the first cross was made. This is Tangerine Jewel, not particularly beautiful in its own right, but it has been a very good parent for other mini cat hybrids. Seagull's Apricot is California Apricot crossed to Hksna, and there's been remakes of this several times. They were all red, very nice red mini cats. Here's another one here. Little Dipper. Here's one of the splashed mini cats. This one has a funny varietal name called Orchid Smooch, and it looks like somebody kissed each petal with lipstick. But here's where we have splash petal, and this is basically where the splash on the petal is the same as what's coming on the lip. And then Laelia Catlettonia Peggy San is a Browtonia hybrid. It's crossed to a large standard size splash petal, and so we get these little 2-inch very colorful splash petals.
What's the splash petal parent?
Somewhere in the background is Intermedia Kinnii. Yeah, which actually we'll see in that section. So current hybrids that you might see today. So these are hybrids that are made by various breeders across the country. You know, the orchid breeders have really been reducing. I mean, there hasn't been as much hybridization going on as a lot of these commercial firms have gone out of business, closed up. It leaves more of the hobbyists and the smaller companies to do the breeding. So probably one of the most prolific breeders is Fred Clark, and I think he's been to your society probably a couple times. And he lives out in San Diego Vista, which is in San Diego County, and he does quite a number of breeding. And this is one of his hybrids. This is Mini Beau. This is Mini Pet crossed to Beaufort, and it was a very nice hybrid. This is one example of it. Here's another one here with the yellow lip. Mini Apricot, another one of his hybrids. This is Mini Pet crossed to California Apricot, and they were all reds. Here's another one here. Seagull's Apricot by Golden Circle. Produced some nice oranges with red lips. Seagull's Mini Cat Heaven. This is Beaufort crossed to Tangerine Jewel. This is Richard Stone. Now, this particular one is, I remade this hybrid between Circle of Life, and I used my little mini Sophronitis coccinea. I was pleased with the results. They were all red, fairly large flowers. They were about 3 inches across. Here's another one here. Star of Life is one of my earlier hybrids. I crossed Circle of Life with Polestar. Here was one of the results, a nice yellow. Very few came out yellow like this. And then this one has the flaring from Laelia bergeri. Dreamcatcher, Bright Angel with Beaufort. Again, produced a nice variety of colors. Here's a yellow one, there's a cute little orange one, and a red one as well. Beau's Apricot Gem, Seagull's Apricot crossed to Beaufort. Some of you might know this one parent of this plant. This is Potinara little Toshie. The one parent is BLC Toshie, which is a standard size yellow with flares coming out of Hawaii. And they crossed that to Beaufort. And now you can see why they called it little Toshie, because it's basically a little miniaturized version of the Toshie parent. Here's another one here with the red flares. Probably one of the best is the variety Gold Country. It does not have the red flares, but it's probably the finest yellow with a red lip mini cat. Sierra Doll. These are hybrids made by Alan Koch at Gold Country Orchids in Sacramento, near Sacramento, California. Pink Doll crossed to Walkeriana. So we have some nice purples coming from this cross. This is also his cross, Sierra Doll crossed to Laelia synchorana. And then this is one of the earlier Alleorii hybrids that Alan made. This is mini purple crossed to Laelia Alleorii. And it's a fairly large flower, nicely flat, not cup-shaped like its one parent. And it does bloom 2 or 3 times a year. Okay, so splash petals is the next section. You know, in my travels, I usually find people that either like splash petals or they don't like them at all. It's kind of one of those extremes. I'm one of the people that like them because every seedling blooms differently. I mean, they have wildly varying patterns and colors. The parent species responsible for almost all of the splash petal types of Cattleyas is this particular species. It's Cattleya intermedia variety Hksna, and this is a mutation that occurred where the petals take on the same color as the lip. So it makes it appear like the flower has 3 lips. The first one is Dream Cloud. It's a hybrid between Little Dipper and Orchidii. And this next example is a particularly nice one from Japan. But you can see how well defined the colors are on the petals and the lip. This is Mary's Song, which is a standard size splash petal crossed to Seagull's Apricot. Rachel's Sunset Glow, Angel Eyes crossed to Beaufort. Potinara Rosella Supreme is actually a hybrid seen in Australia, so we haven't seen this here on this country, but it has an unusual pickety edge with a yellow splash on the petals. Angel's Fantasy, this is a hybrid between Fire Fantasy and Bright Angel, and this particular cross produced a lot of different color variations. There's another one here that was red and white. And then this one, which is variety Solar Flare, is red with yellow splashes. Memoria Trudy Marsh is Tangerine Jewel crossed with another little striped splash petal mini cat called Cosmic Delight. And this is more of Fred Clark's breeding, and he's actually going after this type of splash petal. He's coined it as a candy stripe splash petal. Here's another one here. Tropical Star, this is one of my hybrids. I cross LC Tropical Song, which is a standard size splash petal, with Polestar. Again, got a lot of different color splashes and variations. And here's a third one here. Laelia Catletonia Happy Face is a Bratonia hybrid. This Peggy San by Mary Song. This is a hybrid from Alan Koch. Peggy San crossed to Cattleya Little Dipper. Also was a very high quality cross, producing many, many fine varieties. This is Peggy San by Angel Eyes. Hawkinsara Peggy's Dream is one of my hybrids. I crossed Peggy San with Dream Cloud. Was very happy with the results. Really well-defined color flares on the petals. Here's another one. Okay, spots. So we saw jungle elf, and that's a hybrid with a Clandii and a Sulciana. We back-crossed it to a Clandii, and what we do, by doing so, we get further strengthening of the spots, as you see here.
Is the Clandii sweet-scented?
Clandii does have a fragrance, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So most of the spotted hybrids have some fragrance, some more than others, depending on the parentage. This is Jungle Elf crossed to SLC Precious Stones. And so now we're getting some oranges and yellows with the spots. And Jungle Gem has now become a very fine parent. Here's another one here. This one's called Cheetah Freckles. This is Jungle Gem by Tropical Pointer. There's another one here. So the spotted hybrids tend to be a little bit taller than the average mini cat. They will be about 8 inches, maybe 10 inches tall on maturity, but they are still, much smaller than the standard size spotted bifoliates. This is Catherine Clarkson. This is Mark Jones crossed to Jungle Gem. And most of these hybrids were made by Fred Clark. I do have a couple of his newest yellow spotted mini cat breeding on the sale table.
Are all the spots bifoliates?
I'm sorry?
Are all of the spots bifoliate?
Are all the spots bifoliate? I would say yes, because Aclandii, Gutata, Tigrina, Amethysta glossa, all of those spotted type flower species are bifoliate. Yeah.
And then carries through 2 and 3 generations away from
well, you'll start to see, like when I look at the seedling population of a spotted hybrid mini cat, they'll be mixed. Some of the leaves will be single, and some of them will be bifoliate. So the farther you get away from it, the more you'll start to see single-leafed plants.
From your experience, is it safer to say that bifoliate still in the offspring table smell better than the unifoliate offspring of the same cross?
Yeah, so the question is, if it's a bifoliate, will it have better fragrance than a single-leafed type? I would say yes. Yeah. This one's got a fun name. This is SLC What'll It Be? And that's a hybrid between Jungle Gem and the standard very tall growing Penny Kuroda. And now we're starting to see spotted and splash petal at the same time.
Yeah, cross it like guess what?
Suncoast Sunspots, Jungle Elf crossed to Wine-Eye Leopard. Lucky Gem, Lucky Charms crossed to Jungle Gem. Now what the nice thing about this spotted Cattleyas is that they tend to bloom in the summer. And that summertime seems to be kind of the gap for Cattleyas. And that is because the bifoliates tend to bloom in the summer. So if you have a mixed collection of other mini cats that are oranges and yellows, those will usually bloom in the spring, and then you can have the spotteds that will bloom in the summer. This is Dendy's Gem, Jungle Gem crossed to Suncoast Sunspots. Catherine Clarkson crossed to Leopard Gem. Okay, my last category is micro mini cats, and so I love all types of miniature orchids, and so micro mini cats become even more special because they generally are about 3 or 4 inches tall at the max. There are some exceptions which I'll point out here, but They are usually very small. One of the first micro mini cats was Coral Orb, and that is a hybrid between Hksna and Laelia alaurii. And so these plants are less than 3 inches tall. The flowers are about 2 inches across, and will bloom 2 or 3 times a year. Teensy Weensy. So Barbara mentioned she has a plant of this. So again, Fred Clark is on the micro mini bandwagon as well. And so this is one of his first hybrids that he affectionately called Teensy Weensy. It's a hybrid between Mini Pet and Laelia alaurii. And it bloomed in coral color, purple color. His next hybrid is Itsy Bitsy. That's Beaufort crossed to Laelia alaurii. And we have actually some nice yellows coming out of this cross. This is Sophronitis Wildfire. It's a hybrid between Hksna and its sister species Wittigiana. So those are 2-inch pots, 2.5-inch pot. You can see they're very, very small. Grow about 3 inches tall, and the flowers are almost as large as the plant. This is one of my first micro mini hybrids. This is Mini Pet crossed to Wittigiana. They bloomed out in these brilliant coral pink colors. Plants were 3 inches tall with a 3-inch size flower. Pink Sapphire, another one of my hybrids using Sophronitis Wittigiana. This one's got a fun name, Seagull's Crawfish Pie. I remade this hybrid using Sophronitis brevipedunculatum and a Laelia pumila. And they were all brilliant red purples, blooming on 3-inch tall plants with a 3-inch flower. This is SLC Miyuki Little King. This is a hybrid made in Japan. And that's mini purple crossed to Sophronitis brevipedunculatum. One of my favorite mini cat hybrids is this Sophrolaelia Cheerio. It's a hybrid between Laelia rupestris and Sophronitis cernua. Blooming in a 3-inch pot. It had 12 flowers on a single spike. Very hard to find these days. I happened to buy this clone from Japan, even though it was grown here in the U.S.
And you didn't Mariclone it?
Well, it was a Mariclone from Japan.
Do it again.
I know. Well, I tried to remake the hybrid, had a seed pod. It turned black after 2.5 months.
How about selfing it?
So I'll have to try it again. I tried self it. It would not self. Yeah.
Very stiff.
Yeah. Here's another Cernua hybrid called Seagull's Gumdrop. This is Chocolate Drop. A lot of you are familiar with Cattleya Chocolate Drop crossed to Sophronitis cernua. So this is not really a micro mini cat because, again, they're going to be about 8 to 10 inches tall. But you know, Chocolate Drop will be 2 feet tall or more. So it is definitely miniaturized. But it's a lovely hybrid. I have a seedling of this, a remake of this on the sale table. Whoops, that shows you the growth habit there. It's a bifoliate type. This is a hybrid made in Brazil, Ayrton Senna crossed to Sophronitis cernua. This is one that was made in Taiwan, SLC Wendy's Redstone by cernua. Mirabelle Fleur is Sophronitis cernua crossed to Laelia alaurii. This is Yellow Warbler. Now this is a remake by cernua that Fred Clark made, but most of the seedlings bloomed out orange. I was hoping to get yellow, but I did get one yellow. And there it is. So these are really tiny plants, 3 inches tall. They'll have 6 or 7 flowers on a single spike. This is one of my first micro mini cat hybrids with Cernua. I crossed Polestar with Cernua, named it Tiny Star. And that's blooming in a 2-inch clay pot. Another one there, bloomed out with red flowers.
Volcanic rock?
No, it's in bark. Yeah. Mini Fantasy, this is another one of my hybrids. I use my Angel's Fantasy crossed at Cernua. Usually when you do a splash petal with a hybrid, about 50% will come out splash petal. But in this case, I would say only about 25% came out splash petal. Most of them were solid like this. But still very cute. I still liked it very much. This was probably one of the best ones to bloom out of the cross. And then there were some splash petal ones here. I don't have these hybrids. These are older hybrids, but I do have new Cernua hybrids that I have on the sale table. This is probably the tiniest of all of the micro mini cats. This is SL Bright Spark. That's Cernua crossed to Tiny Rubies. Tiny Rubies is about 3 inches tall. And this was the first bloom seedling, blooming in a 1.5-inch clay pot. It bloomed with 5 flowers on a first bloom seedling. This is a novelty hybrid of, called Cattleya James Pinkney. And that's a hybrid between Brassavola cuculata, which has got a lot of interesting features to it, crossed to Tiny Rubies. And this is one of the ones that bloomed. And I think I still have one or two of these seedlings of James Pinkney on the sale table. So let's talk about culture, how to grow them. So where can you grow them? Well, somebody mentioned windowsills. They typically will mature in a 3 or 4 inch pot. So, you know, most windowsills are about 3 or 4 inches across, so that's perfect for a windowsill. Now, you are going to need a bright windowsill that gets a lot of bright light. So east, west, and south windows are good. West and south, you're going to need some shade because the hot afternoon sun will probably burn them. But you do need a lot of bright light for them. You can grow them under lights. So for those of you who grow under lights, you know, because of their small stature, 5-6 inches or less, they're easy to fit underneath the lights, and you can get them pretty close to the lights as well. Of course, if you have lucky to have a greenhouse, they'll grow beautifully in a greenhouse. And outdoors, for at least part of the year for you guys, they'll do well outside in a filtered sunlight area. Temperature-wise, it can depend on the parentage, but most of them can take pretty low temperatures down into the low 40s before you have to bring them inside to protect them. And then the warmer side, the spotted types, because they have a lot of bifoliate influence, they're the ones that don't take the cold as well, but they do take the heat on the heat side much better. In terms of light, they do like bright light, and you grow your mini cats in the same kind of light conditions as your standard size Cattleyas. So if you're talking foot candles, 2,500 to 3,000 foot candles of light. If you're growing in a full sun area, usually you need about 60 to 70% shade cloth in order to get the light levels down to the right level. Water-wise, they are usually grown in small pots, so you probably have to water them a little bit more often than your standard Cattleyas that are in, you know, 6-8 inch pots. But usually once or twice a week is usually good enough, unless it's really, really hot and dry. Fertilizer, you know, orchids do appreciate some fertilizer during the growing period. The best method is to fertilize with every watering, just so that they get a constant feed. But then in the winter is where you really cut down, because the plants tend to slow down with the less light, the cooler temperatures. They're not growing as actively, so they're not going to need as much fertilizer. Pots and potting medium is always a matter of preference for what works well for you. because what works well for me in California may not be the same as over here. So I typically use bark and perlite in a plastic pot, but some of the more finicky ones like the Coccinia hybrids, I will use sphagnum moss and clay pots for that. But they will also do well mounted if you like to have a lot of mounted orchids, baskets. You know, people will grow them in lava rock or inorganic types of media as well. Pest and disease, you know, not always the favorite topic to discuss, but you know, with growing orchids, you're always going to face some pests and disease. For mini cats, the major pest is the same for the large Cattleyas, and that's the white scale, Bois de Vos scale. And it's a nasty pest, and you really have to keep an eye out for it, because if it takes a hold of your plants, it can be very, very hard to eradicate. They tend to congregate in the juncture of the leaf and the pseudobulb, underneath the dry brown sheaths, at the rhizome level, and even on the roots. So you really have to make sure that you get watch your plants and take care of the problem if you have any plants with the white scale. And if you find a plant with white scale, you always want to check the plants around that plant, because the little juveniles will just float on the air currents, and then they'll land on another plant, and they can infect your other plant as well. And under the leaves, yes. Yeah, one of the telltale signs usually is yellow blotches. And if you turn the leaf underneath, the cause of the yellow blotching is because there's a congregation of white scale underneath. And they basically suck the sap out of your leaves. So they're really damaging. And I always laugh, because when I'm in the greenhouse, you know, I'll look at my plants. I don't necessarily pick them up, but I'll look at the plants, and they all look fine. And then I'll start to notice the little yellow blotch on the back side of the plant. And then I pick up the plant and then look at it, and yes, there's scale underneath the leaf. And they seem to know where you look at your plants. I don't know how they do that, but they always seem to know, and they always seem to know the plant that you never pick up to look at, that's the one they're going to attack as well. Okay, so my last section is on repotting. So the advice on repotting is the best time to repot is when your plant is showing new roots at the rhizome. That is always the best time to repot your orchids. That means the plant is in active growth. The roots will grow into the new media and establish itself really nicely. So here's a plant here in a 3-inch pot. You can see that the pseudobulbs have reached the edge of the pot. There are some new roots forming at the end of the rhizome, so this plant is good, is ripe for repotting. So I'll take the plant out of the pot, and you can see there's a nice healthy root system. Even some of the older roots are showing you know, new root tips and branching. At this time, you can also decide whether or not you want to divide your plants. If you're going to divide your plants, I usually like to keep the divisions with 3 healthy pseudobulbs or more. Some people will go down to 2, but you know, the plant is really going to be stressed out, and it'll take much longer for a 2-bulb division to reestablish itself. So what I do is I shake the bark mixture off of the roots. You know, I don't really use any heavy force to remove it, because in doing so, you're generally going to bruise the roots, and you don't really need to do that. But this is the time where you can look at where you want to divide your plant. Sometimes I'll just, you know, pull the plants apart, but I find oftentimes I'll end up splitting a pseudobulb in half. So it's probably better to use sterile pruning shears or clippers to divide your plants. And that's what I'm doing here. And so that one little pot of plants, I have 4 divisions, and you can see each division has at least 3 healthy pseudobulbs. For those of you who might notice, this plant is actually in bud, and you're probably like, oh, you know, I would never disturb the plant if it's in bud. But remember, I said the best time to repot is when it's in active root growth. And so if I waited for this flower to open and fade, you know, be a month later, and by then the roots might have already grown out of the pot, and in doing so, you know, it'd be much easier to break the roots at that time. So I've chosen to, you know, maybe have to sacrifice the bud, but it's the right time to repot. So I'm going to take each division and put it into a new pot. I push the back of the plant to the back of the pot so that the empty space is ready for the new growth to grow into. And then I'll just throw the mix into the pot. I want to keep the rhizome at the same level as it was before. I don't want to bury the rhizome underneath the bark. I also don't want the rhizome sticking out of the bark as well. And I usually just use my thumbs with gentle pressure. I don't use a hard potting stick or anything to jam the roots, the bark into the pot, because you're probably going to end up breaking the roots if you're using a lot of force. So now I'm done with all 4 divisions, and one of the things I always have to remember to do is label all of your plants at the time of repotting. You know, you think that you're going to remember what they are, but when you put them back in your growing area, they all look alike. You know, they're not in flower anymore. So always remember to label all your plants at that time. What size bark is that? Is seedling size bark. So I use seedling size bark for 3-inch pots or less. Once I go to a 4-inch pot, I will use the medium bark size for the plant.
If you pull it out of the pot and you find that the center is dead,
Mm-hmm.
you might have used too small of a bark even then, and you might have needed to use a larger bark if you're putting it back in the same size pot, because if it's not growing roots there, it didn't like what you used.
That could be, yeah. So he's just mentioning that if I take the plant out of the pot and there's dead roots in the center, it could mean that the bark is too small and too fine for it.
Maybe just too old.
Or too old, yes. And a lot of it can depend on your watering habits as well. You know, if you're a heavy waterer, you're going to want to use bigger size bark. But because I usually only water once or twice a week, the seedling bark is fine for me. And what I usually use is about 3/4 bark to 1/4 perlite. That's the only thing I put into my bark. Photo credits, a lot of the photos were mine, but again, a lot of the photos were from Fred. My last photos are just some displays of mini cats that I've done in the past. They make great tabletop displays because of their size. So this is an 8-foot long table, and I use a mix of terrariums and things. But you can see the lovely color range, the jewel-like colors, and they make really nice displays. And here's another one here. And another one here. I have a website. It's diamondorchids.com in case you wanted to contact me or review my list of plants that I have for sale. And do we have any other questions? We can have the lights up. Yes?
I seem to notice that my mini cats, the blooms don't seem to last as long as my standard Cattleyas. I didn't know if it was something that I was doing in the growth environment or if it was just kind of the nature of the beast.
Yeah, her comment is that she finds that her mini cat flowers do not last as long as her standard size cats. Some of that can depend on the parentage, because some of the parentage, the flowers may not last as long, but they generally do seem to last about the same. I'm sorry?
I only get like 3 to 5 days.
Oh, well, that's pretty small number of days. Yeah. I don't know. It could be your environmental conditions. Maybe they're drying out too much during that time. Because usually if the plant flowers die quicker than normal, it means the plant is responding to something in its environment. Yes?
So, how do you tell apart, how do you distinguish between Sophronitis, Brevipediculata versus Hksna?
How do you tell the difference between Sophronitis brevipedunculata and Sophronitis coccinea? There are some, what I find are some differences is the plant size. Breva pedunculata tends to be smaller, shorter in the leaf habit. Hksna tends to have a dark burgundy stripe down the midrib of the leaf. Breva pedunculata does not have the stripe at all. The way Breva pedunculata grows, it usually grows a little bit more flat to the surface of the growing area, versus Hksna has more vertical pseudobulbs and leaves. So those are just some indications on that. The actually harder to tell the difference is between Breva pedunculata and Wittigiana. That's where the hard part comes in.
So those two species all kind of look the same then otherwise?
Are they what?
They all kind of look the same otherwise? Reticulata and the other one you mentioned, Hksna.
Wittigiana. They do look, the plants look the same. Yeah, but I think Hksna looks fairly different than the other two.
How well do they take to, like, if you're growing it in like a semi-hydroponic environment?
The question is, how do they take to growing in a semi-hydro? I don't know. I have no experience with semi-hydro. I would think that they may not do that well in semi-hydro, just because of the way they grow in nature. The roots can rot easily. So, you know, if there's constant moisture from semi-hydro, I don't know if they would do that well.
Okay.
Do you do your own flasking?
Do I do my own flasking? No, I do not. I send it to a lab. I'm lucky to have a lab that's just about 20 miles away, so I can drop the pot off, pick up the flask, and not have to worry about shipping. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much.